ABSL Summit. Beyond Tomorrow. Building a Sustainable Future.
Good morning, everyone.
Welcome.
Welcome to our first day of People Stream Agenda. My name is Anna Berczyńska, and together with Paweł Łopatka, we have a pleasure to co-host the two-day People Stream with you. Our today's focus is the mental well-being of people and the focus to rebuild a more human-centric workplace environment. According to Adecco Group in their latest research, employees are still adapting to the new reality, but they are less concerned about losing their job. They notice the risks, but they also take up opportunities brought by the post-COVID reality. An ideal workplace model nowadays is a balance between working from home and working in the office. So it is completely different than in the beginning of 2020. Now the key is to find the right balance and integrate co-workers and create the conditions for their mental and physical well-being.
ABSL annual report states that the most common employee benefits fall into two groups: those that concern the form and organization of work, and those that focus on health and well-being of employees. For example, sport packages, fitness classes, health and fitness programs, fruits and healthy snacks. Employees in the sector are increasingly focusing not only on implementing benefits with individual employee in mind, but also on generating solutions which benefit the entire community. The clear trend is to extension of diversity and inclusion culture to accommodate the significant role of the sense of belonging, in particular among new workers joining corporate teams in the pandemic era. It gives us a thrill to welcome Dr. Mario Martinez on stage, the expert at Longevity Center for Poland and Germany.
Dear Mario, let's get us inspired by well-being as an enhancer of sustainability.
Sorry. Oh, thank you. The green spot is very important. Well, welcome. I'm glad that you took the time to be here. What I'm going to be talking about, of course, is the future and sustainability of the future and the things that are important here. But I'm going to bring a new component into it, which is how does our biology respond to all of this? And what is the best organization in the world? And the best organization in the world is your immune system. It has to manage 50 trillion cells, and it hasn't had an update in 150,000 years, so that's even better than Apple. Very good. So in our work, I'm a neuropsychologist, what I do with organizations is I teach organizations to make decisions like the immune system does. Hundreds of thousands of decisions under adversity without having to consult the brain. So that's remarkable if you can transfer that to organizations. And the idea is to be able to keep productivity and wellness together, or productivity and well-being. And what's happened is that it's been divided. For example, you have experts in productivity, and you have experts in wellness or well-being, and some will work on how to be effective and efficient with your production, and how to, on the wellness side, how to lose weight, how to have a better diet, how to stop smoking. Those things are necessary but not sufficient. That's not how it works. So what I want to do is show you how what we call the empowerment code, how that works together. So what I've done is put together 3 areas that don't communicate with each other, that have tremendous discoveries and information, but they don't share it. And this is extremely important to be able to use it in organizations, because it's not only the wellness and productivity of the organization, but the sustainability of what? What do you want to sustain? Profits, productivity, wellness, and it's very important to converge them and look at them as inseparable. So we have cultural neuroscience, which says, how does the brain work in different cultures? And the brain is cultural. The brain is not just universal. It's a very cultural brain. When we developed language and consciousness, it became cultural, and the immune system responds to culture. So that's what we contribute with the cultural neuroscience. Cultural psychoneuroimmunology, it's a big word, PNI, but what it means is that for the last 40 years, we have been studying how thoughts and emotions regulate the nervous, immune, and endocrine system. So you have to bring that into an organization because sometimes we do things that appear to be reasonable, that appear to be effective, and actually they're doing damage. Many executives have problems with gastrointestinal issues, hypertension, because of these kinds of things that are not looked at. And the best leader is the leader who's healthy. And the third part is cultural anthropology. What is it that people do when they get together? It's cultural. In Poland, they get together in a particular way, in the United States another way, but there's some universals that actually are important in looking at organizations, that if they're not followed, then people break down. For example, there are two ways to make people sick in an organization. First, you give them a job with responsibility without authority. They get sick, or they get disinterested, or they quit. Second, you give them a job without meaning. Same thing happens. And in the United States, what's happened, I think, in general with COVID, is that COVID has moved us into a faster generation. We had the agricultural for 10,000 years, and we had the industrial, then we had the information, and now we have the meaning revolution. And what COVID has done is what any pandemic does, or any kind of situation that forces you to look at your mortality. People around you die, you have a potential to get very sick. And what do we do psychologically when that happens? Well, we go and look internally, we create meaning. What is meaningful in my life? And knowing how to do this will help you understand what needs to happen after COVID. We go into the caves, and we're there, we're hiding, and we're communicating with other people through Zoom or whatever. But then we look at ourselves and we ask, was the job that I had, did it have meaning? Was it really what I wanted to do? And this is why many people in many countries, especially in the United States, are quitting their jobs even though they don't have another job because of the meaning component of it. So that is an extremely important part. The other part that I've looked into is centenarians, people who live over 100 who are healthy, not sick centenarians. Why? Because science has to look at what works. What works in longevity, sustainability, centenarians. And the good news is that the genes or genetic endowment is only 20%. The rest is what you do, what I call biosymbolic, what you do with your life and the way you interpret your life. Stress is an interpretation of a context. And what's happened with psychoneuroimmunology especially is that they study stress, and we know a lot about cortisol and a lot about norepinephrine and how people respond to stress, but very little work has been done on what are the neurotransmitters and what are the other peptides and things that work to maintain your health. And that's what I'll be talking about very quickly. I'm giving you 150,000 years of history in 15 minutes, so it's kind of difficult. So, as I said, it makes millions of decisions, and productivity and wellness are inseparable. Beyond the stress hormones, so what does stress do? Stress basically is an important signal that you get from the brain, from the hypothalamus and so forth, that says something is happening here that's more important than digesting your food, is more important than being creative. Right now you have to take care of this. And then later, the immune system will go back and fight pathogens after the stress. But what do? We're the only animal that sticks with a problem and ruminates on it. So for example, you're driving to work and somebody gets in front of you and you almost have an accident and you begin to feel the stress. Of course, you feel the epinephrine and all that. But what do you do when you get to work? Guess what happened? I was driving to work and this guy got in front of me and I almost had an accident. What the brain is doing is reliving it and keeping the cortisol and the norepinephrine higher. And then people like to out-victimize each other and say, no, that's nothing. Yesterday I had 3 people that got in front of me. So you begin to victimize and you begin to live in a world of helplessness. One example of that, when you put people or even rats into a no-escape situation, where a rat, it's put in a small place and they shock it, but they can't escape. And they shock it and they can't escape. After a while, the rat gives up, and then you inject cancer cells, and it grows like wildfire. But if you let that rat learn empowerment, which is access to resources to overcome a challenge, that's empowerment. That's it. You let them press a lever, and they learn very quickly. They press a lever, and there's no shock, there's no shock, there's no shock. You inject them with cancer cells, nothing happens. Why? Because the natural killer cells are the ones that fight precancer cells, and when you go into helplessness, they're reduced in population and they're reduced in the power that they have to fight illnesses, from cancer to COVID. So then it's very important to be able to see the terrains of productivity and wellness. And terrain more than behavior. It's not behavior, it's a terrain that supports the behavior. And these are the three components that a leader needs or a person needs in order to be sustainable, which means that I'm productive today and I'm healthy today, and 10 years from now, I'm as productive and as healthy. That's the sustainability that we're wanting. Creativity, generosity, gratitude, and admiration, those appear to be very almost altruistic kinds of things, but that's how the immune system works. So what happens then is that there are consequences for each of these. These are the good guys: serotonin, dopamine, oxytocin, endorphins. These are the immune regulators and immune enhancers. And all of these four actually trigger those mechanisms. But what happens, for example, with gratitude? Gratitude will trigger serotonin, which is an antidepressant, and it triggers dopamine, which is what they call the joy neurotransmitter. But what happens in our cultures? Gratitude is an acceptance of something. And they'll say, I like your shirt. Oh, it's an old shirt. I've worn it for many years. To kill the joy. So you kill the opportunity to have serotonin, oxytocin, and all these other things because the culture said, no, you can't really, I like your hair. Oh, I haven't washed it in 3 days. So what do centenarians do? They know how to accept, they know how to go into gratitude. So they see all four of these components. I was talking to a 102-year-old woman, and I said, you're very beautiful. And she said, yes, I've always been beautiful. Ever since I was a little girl, I was beautiful. Refreshing. She got all those four. If you say, oh, well, I'm too old, kill it. So these are the things that are potential to make you healthy, but they're killed with the cultural components. Admiration is extremely important. Admiration, why do we need admiration? If you are a leader and you admire, you are emulating behavior that you can learn yourself. And when you have admiration, you have all four of them, also dopamine, oxytocin, endorphin. But if you have admiration with envy, it cancels everything. It doesn't work. So you see how you can actually kill the potential that you have to make things healthy and worthy. Creativity is extremely important. Creativity, dopamine. Actually, dopamine has to do with joy, but also has to do with creativity. When you're being creative, your dopamine goes up, which is a powerful immune regulator. When you're not being creative, then you're in a state of just existing. So the way to look at it, rather than energy or the universe, when people talk about the universe is protecting me, the universe is very interested only in expanding. It's not going to stop to say, I'm going to get you a new car. It doesn't work that way. So the way to look at it, we're bioinformational fields, which means what does biology do with information at the cognitive level, at whatever level? And then each of the responses that we do, especially on a pattern basis, will have an immunological, nervous, and endocrine responses to a pattern of behaviors. So then what happens? The causes and the dampers of wellness and productivity. On the plus side, we have creativity, which is extremely important for a leader. They have to go to the future and come back from the future and convey the information. It's killed by power-driven processes. You have to have power and you have to have profits, but value-driven is what really matters, because then it takes care of the other two. You have gratitude and generosity, but it'll kill it with quid pro quo. I pay for dinner today, next time you pay for dinner. Quid pro quo. It's give, take, rather than offer and receive. So what we teach is that when you are grateful, gratitude is enough. You don't need to have reciprocity. When you're generous, you don't need to be with reciprocity either. So the quid pro quo will kill it. And admiration will be killed with envy, because envy is a very negative emotion, immunologically deficiency caused by the envy. So and we teach techniques on how to do this, how to admire without envy, how to be creative without the power-driven, and so forth. So very important before finishing is that all these things need to be taught, but they need to be operationalized. When you ask for sustainability, what do you want to sustain is the first question. And now what's happened with COVID, what is it that you need to do to give up the things that you were doing before when you were going to work? Many companies have shifted, but the biggest mistake is to go back to what you were doing before without any assessment of your meaning. And what do I have, 4 or 5 minutes left? Well, okay, good. So I want to talk about Aristotle very quickly, because the immune system has morals. It has a way of understanding ethics. And what is a culture, by the way? The culture is really the important things in our lives: our wellness, our aesthetics, our ethics, our way of looking at time. Time is an affordance. Time doesn't do anything. It affords the duration of space. So when people say time will heal, time doesn't do anything. It's the immune system's healing, or you're healing, or you're doing some work. Time is an affordance only. So it's only very important to see that. Then a couple of other things. Happiness does not translate to productivity or wellness in a sustainable way. You could be very happy and very lazy and very non-productive, or you could be very unhappy and very productive. What translates is meaning. And meaning is the part that's most important that I want to convey here. And here I'm going back to Aristotle. Aristotle said that the life of hedonic pleasure is not enough. That to have pleasure is not enough, to happy. That you need more than that. You need what he called eudaimonia, which means is good, and daimonia, spirit, good spirit. But what it means is that you have to find meaning, you have to find pleasure in purpose, meaning, and service. If you're able to do that, you're going to have a healthier life. Well, very interesting research just came out very recently that looked at, okay, what would happen if we start testing immunologically what Aristotle said. And one of the things that we have in the immune system is called CTRA, which is a set of genes that has to do with anti-inflammatory, antiviral, especially for COVID, and pathogens and antibodies. So they measured people psychologically, they measured people who are hedonic and people who are eudaimonia. They found the people that lived the Aristotle way to have a better CTRA response to adversity. But you can see happiness here. They measured the level of happiness of both, and it was the same. But the immune system could discern the difference between hedonic and eudaimonia. So it's extremely important to be able to look at these things and then bring together how much pleasure do I find in service? How much pleasure do I find in the meaning of my life? And how much pleasure do I find in the purpose of my life? And interestingly, these are the things that need to be asked during COVID. One important component, for example, COVID, like any other virus, usually works on the upper respiratory system. What's the best antibody for any kind of upper respiratory? IgAs, which is one of the 5 antibodies. How does IgA work? IgA works by watching compassion or experiencing compassion for yourself. Studies have looked at Mother Teresa, of watching Mother Teresa doing her kind work and so forth, and then the Nazi army doing their work. Pre-post, 15 minutes. The IgAs of Mother Teresa way up there, the others down. Now we know that it's not only IgAs, but all of those other hormones and peptides go up also. So, but the most important is that if you're compassionate with yourself, it has to be inclusive. If you're compassionate with yourself, you actually increase more IgAs than just watching a video. And finally, to show how the brain works, the brain is constantly adjusting. 20 years ago, oxytocin is a very important peptide and neurotransmitter. Well, it was thought that only women have the oxytocin because it's shown in breastfeeding and when the child is delivered. And the thought, this is just women. Men have as much oxytocin as women. So when you're looking at someone and you smile, oxytocin goes up. But what happened is that now you're smiling in Zoom. A few years ago, oxytocin did not respond. The immune system and the endocrine system could see that this was not real. Now there's an adjustment in very few years where actually you can begin to secrete oxytocin through Zoom because of the adjustment process of the immune, nervous, and endocrine system. All these things are important to navigate what the other experts were talking about, to bring it together and bring the new component of psychoneuroimmunology and anthropology into the workplace. So I think my time is out, and thank you very much. So if you just smile at each other, oxytocin will go up. Thank you.
Resilience, maturity, talents, growth, innovation. The change made us stronger. This all made us sustainable. ABSL Summit. Beyond tomorrow. Building a sustainable future.